And we're live, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining another episode of Coffee and Ham Radios. This one's called Cafe Noir because we do it at night. I don't really know what that means, but that's just what we say.
We talk dirty. We can say dirty things.
You're right.
Mm-hmm. And we asked our buddy Radio Dan to come back and join us. He was on a few shows ago where we were talking about a CW radio that has just come out. And Dan is the owner and proprietor, is that right, of Ham Gadgets?
And
they have everything that you need, and even things you don't know you need on their website. And we asked him to come on today to talk a little bit about amplifier buffers. And we believe that's going to be an hour worth of content. And if it's not, we'll talk about some other stuff. Before we get started, an interrogation of Dan. Does anybody have anything that they need to bring up?
Speak now or forever hold your peace. Is that what this is?
We have antennas for sale at coffeeandhamradios.com and coffee for sale at hamradios.coffee. And that's in the Chiron. That's the name for that dingus down there.
I thought it was called a ticker.
That's the official.
A banner.
The professional word is called
Guys, you know something I forgot
Chiron.
to actually mention. Are you guys going to have a raffle this week?
No.
No, but we can. What are you thinking?
I would be more than happy to donate an RBI 1 to the lucky winner.
Oh, well,
we
can do that.
We can do that right now.
Dan the man.
Tonight.
Dan, you just
tonight.
Glowed up.
Yeah,
not right
my
now.
perspective here.
Right.
You know, I used to like you, but now I like you so much more.
Well, now we love you.
Wow.
Thank you.
It's getting better.
My wife.
Very generous.
It's not our fault, is it?
All right, well, let's get started. Tell us about amplifier buffers and why we need them.
Well, basically, an amplifier needs to be keyed by the radio in order to go from the receive mode back into the transmit mode. And the reason we need a buffer is because many times the relay circuit in an amplifier has either too much voltage or current that it needs to actually close the relay in the amplifier to go from receive to transmit. So if you were to think of the relay circuit in an amplifier, picture a battery and a light bulb. And if you connect the battery to the light bulb glows. But if you cut one of the wires and then you put like an RCA jack, for example, on there, and then you put your radio's keying circuit to that RCA jack, when you key your radio, the radio itself now will complete that circuit that was opened by you cutting it and making the light bulb glow. So in this case, the light bulb basically is the relay in the amplifier. And that's really all that appears on the back of your amplifier is just the ability to complete that circuit that the relay is in. That's how an amplifier needs to be keyed. So the reason we need a buffer many times is because that amplifier's relay is got too much current to go ahead and close it, or the voltage on the relay system exceeds what the ability of the radio to switch is. Some radios, like for example the ICOM 706 series, they have 20 milliamps of current is the ability to go ahead and complete a circuit. So if you were to go ahead and try to have the 706 complete a circuit, like for example even a fan or something at 100 milliamps for a fan circuit, well, it would exceed what that 20 milliamps of current could do. So in that case, you need to go ahead and key a buffer, and my buffer requires very little current from the actual keying device, your radio, to activate it. And then on the output, it's completely isolated. It's an actual physical relay. It's a fast relay. It's less than 5 milliseconds of switching time. And then that relay's contact closure will go ahead and key your amplifier. So your radio never sees anything as far as voltage or current on the actual amplifier's keying line. Now, sometimes, even if the radio has the capability of working with the amplifier's relay's voltage and current requirement to close it, if anything goes wrong inside that amplifier, if you have any voltage spike or a RF that comes back along that amplifier keying line to your radio, if there's no buffer there, you could hurt your radio pretty bad. If at the very easiest, it would be send it back to the manufacturer, probably $150, $200 for the repair, and then 6 to 8 weeks for the repair time and shipping both ways.
Yeah, the shipping's where they really get you. That's how they get you.
And not only that, you end up with a problem of now you got to pack the radio and hope that UPS or FedEx doesn't destroy it on the way to the factory,
or lose it, right?
Right.
Or lose it.
it.
Well, something.
Yeah, better put the insurance on it.
That's right. If you insured it for enough, then you don't have to worry about losing it, right?
And get a new radio.
You hope they do. Anyway, I wanted to show you guys the, just for example, I've got a relay here that is used in a typical Dentron MLA 2500. And the reason I use that is I just happen to have some of these relays. We sell them, and they are, when the contacts go bad or whatever, you just want to replace the relay as opposed to trying to clean the contacts or adjust them. So it's a double pole, double throw relay, very good for RF, and it takes about 120 milliamps of current to close it at 12 volts. A 12-volt relay. So the voltage would probably be fine on your radio's keying circuit to go ahead and key this amplifier that would have that relay in there for the transmit receive. But 120 milliamps of current may be more than what your radio can handle, especially if it's a solid state switching device, some sort of a transistor. If it's got a tiny little relay in there, it's possible that you could actually weld the contacts of the relay shut if you try to pull too much current through that. In fact, some of you people have probably seen that with reed relays. Many times, if you try to pull too much current through a reed relay, it'll just weld itself stuck and just stay there. So,
yeah, I wanted to mention, so our good friend Bob at the HOA Ham channel, he's saying a keen relay buffers, cheap insurance.
Yes.
And that's a really good point. When you spend, $1,000, $1,500 on a radio, and then you spend a ton of money on a good amp, or even if you spend a little bit of money on a cheap amp, it really makes sense to invest a little bit of money protecting your equipment than going in wrong.
Yeah, and our RBI 1A, which is our flagship buffer, we've sold probably somewhere around 7,000 of these things, believe it or not. Yeah, that little buffer, we've sold about 7,000 of them. It's almost indestructible. I have had a handful of those things come back since we've been making them for probably about 10 years. And my most entertaining way that they come back for repair is because somebody somehow got confused in how to use it. Even though
put it in backwards.
No, they put RF into the input jack instead of just switching it. So they put their antenna's output into the jack, and I can see what happened. Basically, they fried the input resistor to the transistor that drives the relay, because it's a buffered device. So you don't drive. There's not a relay only in there. It's buffered, so that's how it only takes a small amount of current, because the relay itself draws about 40 milliamps of current from your power supply, but the radio's keying circuit only sees less than 1 milliamp of current to close it. But anyway, it's a very reliable device, and it's $70. It's $69.95 plus shipping. So talk about cheap insurance. HOA Ham's got that correct.
And then we got Tio doing some diagramming over here. Is that what's going on, son?
Yeah. Because people we're just talking about this stuff out loud, but we're not really talking about like where it goes in series and how it looks and that kind of thing. So, what I have seen is where you, like on my 705 and my 125B amplifier, I will plug it directly in using there's a real simple cable. It's like an 8-pin mini DIN on the back of the amp and a 3.5 millimeter that goes into the send port on the 705. Yeah, and what Dan is saying is don't do that. That's bad stuff.
And to be honest with you, I've sold probably about 600 of the IC705 to the RBI 1A and the XPA 125B amplifier cable combinations, about 600 of those. But I've also sold about 500 of the cables only, because sometimes a guy just is willing to go ahead and take a chance and wants it to be a little bit lighter from that point of view. In other words, you don't have to have the RBI 1A or a power supply to run it. Although, like I say, that little RBI 1A takes about 40 milliamps of current from your power supply, and it comes with
almost put a AA battery in there.
Well, you're going to need 12 volts to power it.
Okay, so 6.
Sorry, exactly. So this is
Thank God he's wearing pants.
This is the power cable that it comes with. It's about. Oh, there we are. It's a 2.1 by 5.5 millimeters, so you could use anything that you commonly have yourself. It's the most common coaxial DC power supply jack and plug, so you can use that if you want, or if you can use a wall wart. We use the common wall warts ourselves. You don't even have to have much current, but the ones we offer are 1 amp, just because they're common and easy to come by. Regulated power supply.
So makes a lot of sense when, like we were talking before stream, this makes a lot of sense if you're using an older amp that's like a tube amp or something that has a lot of current to switch it. But
Yes.
this XPA 125, it's TTL logic to TTL logic. So tell us about how your buffer protects 5 volts to 5 volts kind of thing, if that's or do a better job than I'm doing, because I don't know what I'm talking about. That's why you're here.
Well, like I say, this would be one of the amplifiers that when everything is working right, it's okay to go ahead and key that directly. Although the 705 has had a lot of problems. If you take a look at some of the forums, in fact, some of the guys here probably have been in the IC 705 forums, and they talk about how delicate the switching circuit is inside the IC 705. Now, in your particular case, and with the XPA 125B, I guess it's kind of a choice as to whether somebody wants to use it. We've sold, like I say, almost as much direct cables without the interface buffer as with the direct or with the interface buffer setup. So it depends on how risky you want to be. And it's not a terrible risk to run the 705 directly to the XPA 125B if everything works good all the time. But a lot of times we use these things in the field. So we have field antennas. RF may be floating around a little bit closer than what we want with this 100-watt amplifier or 125-watt amplifier. And if you're using sort of an antenna that's, a little bit closer than what you want it to be to your radio stuff, maybe your cable is not as or even at the output of the cable, it's still going to pick up common mode currents on the shield of the output of the output cable from the 705's keying circuit to the XPA 125B's 6-pin mini DIN jack. So you can use it either way, just if everything works okay.
Yeah, this is insurance in case something goes sideways too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have viewers of the channel that insist the common mode currents aren't real. And
fake news. Fake news.
Just a brief thing about common mode currents. For example, if you're looking at an antenna, for example, and you're wondering if you have common mode currents on the coax coming back from your antenna, here's an easy way to test it. While looking at your SWR meter, sending a constant carrier, grab the coax and move it around. If you can go ahead and change the SWR by putting your hand on it and moving it around, then you do indeed have common mode currents coming back.
It's a nice tip.
That's just an easy way to be able to tell it. And then the way you go ahead and choke that is with either a DC line, or I'm sorry, a RF line isolator, which is basically a current choke. And a current choke is really nothing more than a piece of coax with ferrite beads on top of it, or around it. So there's nothing magical about that. You could actually use like a round toroid and wind your own. There you go. That's a common mode.
As soon as you said that, Dan, I saw his eyes get all
big. He's probably got 6 of them sitting there.
And he's like, ooh, I got this right down here in my choke collection.
Look, you got a fresh haircut too.
I told you I have to go to a customer meeting.
That's right. He could either wind it on a round toroid, or and what he's showing there is got heat shrink tubing over the ferrite beads that are on a piece of coax.
Well, I also put them on my power cables for my power supply, and because sometimes you can get currents coming back in that way, and so I put them everywhere.
Hey, there's my friend Scott Bulkley from Ham Radio for non-techies.com. Scott has been the one who had helped me get this set up with this camera we're about to show you with the interface and all that stuff. So thank you very much, Scott.
Yeah, we're surprised it's working, knowing he helped you out on that.
Cable.
I'm just kidding.
That's
right. Gas station.
Look at that red and white cable. That reminds me of classic speaker cable from 1920s radio.
Is that from a Shenzhen gas station?
Cloth covered, yeah.
Nah, this is from right down the street. The old come and go.
That could be another show. I've got over 100. I've got over 100 old broadcast radios from even the cathedrals and tombstone radios of the early 30s. That's a lot of fun stuff. Anyway, I digress.
You got to know electronics and woodworking.
Yes, well, that's one thing I don't do much. I'm not big on the cosmetics. I'm more so about the function. I'm all about that.
Well, we'll bring you on to talk about all those radios too, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
We'll be the ham gadgets and coffee. Everybody's giving me a hard time about all the chokes, and I'm a big proponent of choking everywhere and anywhere that you can.
Choke everything.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the demo portion, and then after that, what we'll do is we'll take a look at the website and see what kind of things people would want and how they can determine what they need.
Okay, then I guess I'll switch camera here.
He didn't do his demonstration yet, right?
Yeah, we're fixing to do it now, son.
Yeah. Okay. Keep up, Charles.
Well, he said the. Never mind.
I mean,
All right. Are we here?
We are.
We are, but we need to get you into the big screen. There we
there
go.
you go.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Very good.
In him.
Right.
There you
All
go.
right.
Right.
So what I've got here is on this side, this cable here. Oops, let's see. I'll get that actually in the picture. There you go. This is the input cable, and that's going to key either the relay or the relay buffer interface. Right now, I've got it bypassing the relay buffer interface and going directly to key the relay. So what this meter is going to measure is the amount of current that it takes to go ahead and close this relay. So all we're doing is sending the voltage for to key this relay directly to the relay coil, and this is what we're using to switch it. One of our PTT switches, which we sell these too, of course. Anyway, this has got a momentary and latch contact on there. So if I just press it down a little bit, you'll see the LED right there, light. There it is. If you just press it a little bit, it's momentary.
And we can see the switch on the relay moving as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
Yep.
what you're and I've got the this current meter in the 250 milliamp full scale position. So now you can see that we're approximately 120 milliamps of current to close the coil. In other words, to activate the coil and close this relay, which is typical of an amplifier's keying circuit relay. So that's how much current your radio would have to actually what we call sync. In other words, to go ahead and pass through the keying circuit to complete the relay's energizing coil. So if I was to go ahead and take the butt splice out of there and now hook up the relay buffer interface in its place, now what we'll be measuring is how much current it takes to go ahead and activate the RBI1, and that RBI1 will go ahead and key your relay. So let's keep it in the same 250 milliamps. Now you see the light is, there we are. The light is still being activated when I press it, but the current is really almost non-measurable. Let's go to the 100 milliamp scale, 50 milliamps. This is 25 milliamps full scale, 10, 5, and finally we get a little bit of activity on the 1 milliamp scale. So it's less than 1 milliamp of current from your radio's keying circuit to activate the RBI1, which will then basically switch any amplifier on the planet, and probably some that aren't on the planet. But it's fast too. It's 5 milliseconds for switching time. Let's go ahead and talk just a second about the switching time. If you send RF out your radio at the exact same time the switching happens, for example, then the relays inside the amplifier take a small amount of time, usually somewhere around 10, 12 milliseconds of time to switch from the receive mode to the transmit mode. In other words, to put the amplifier in transmit. So if you send RF at the same time as the switching goes, then you'll actually have the RF be ahead of the switching by the relay's switch time, which would be 10 or 12 milliseconds of speed. So what we use is what's called TXD, or transmit delay. Some of you guys out there have got ICOM IC7300s, just as an example, but many modern radios have got TXD in there. So, oh yeah, it's an analog meter. That's right. Well, I'm a dinosaur. Anyway, so the ICOM 7300 has a TXD, Tango X-ray Delta, transmit delay setting in it. And I recommend setting that for somewhere around 20, 25 milliseconds, because the 5 milliseconds of our relay buffer interface, and then the, say, between 10 and 12 milliseconds of most amplifier relay switching will still put you easily able to delay your RF getting to the amplifier in plenty of time to have the relays already switch. In other words, what ends up happening with the transmit delay, this TXD, is it actually delays your RF 20 milliseconds if you have the setting, if you have TXD set for 20 milliseconds before the actual RF gets there. So now the relays have got a chance to switch before the RF from the radio gets there. The reason we can't do anything after the radio, of course, is how do you delay RF that already comes out the door? Inside the radio, they have the ability to go ahead and send the switching circuit out first before the RF goes out. And that's what TXD is. You'll see that. I believe it's pretty much called TXD in most radios. So make sure you have that set to somewhere around 20 or 25 milliseconds. Let me tell you this, even if you were to go ahead and run QSKCW, you're not going to have any problems at all with 20 milliseconds of speed difference, even at very high speeds. So don't worry about that. And obviously for things like digital or sideband or whatever, it's completely irrelevant. But if you're operating at, say, 30, 35 words a minute on CW, don't even worry about it at all.
Well, you know, you make a really good point there, and I wanted to mention something. So a lot of people say set that delay when you're using auto sensing in your amp, but the amp can't auto sense, right? The problem's in the amplifier, not the radio at that point. It can't auto sense until there's RF, so delaying the RF does not help.
No, because that's right. Because you're not using the switching circuit, so you can delay the RF by wanting to transmit and then waiting a half a second to transmit. You've also delayed the RF, so you know.
Right. So it doesn't do anything without a keying circuit like this buffer, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And usually, what ends up happening is a lot of times the relays in amplifiers are sort of overbuilt. In other words, they use the same size contacts that would be normally dealing with a kilowatt or 2 kilowatts. They use another set of the same contacts on the relay for your low wattage stuff, like the input power, like 100 watts. So they just live with hot switching. And the amount of hot switching on big contacts, it takes a longer time to go ahead and hurt those contacts at 100 watts for switching, as opposed to trying to switch big current, at a kilowatt.
Yeah, and you're using a lot of fancy words, so I might be getting a little bit confused here. But also there's a condition where when you're not even keying your amplifier, the amplifier still supplies a voltage back into your radio, right?
Well, there's the relay circuit itself inside an amplifier usually is positive on the center pin of the RCA jack of the amplifier. So from that point of view, if you do think of it that way, since 12 volts is actually appearing on the relay jack center conductor, that 12 volts goes to the switching circuit of your radio. But your radio is also what's called in a high. In other words, you have to go from a high to a low. A low is a ground on transmit. So therefore, it's already high to start with. So even if it's 5 volts high or 12 volts high or whatever on the actual amplifier's keying circuit in the radio, the fact that you're presenting 12 volts from the relay of the amplifier is irrelevant.
Okay.
I got that deer in the headlights looking there. Sorry about that, but I don't know.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to think through it. So I know that Kevin Laughlin, this old tech guy, he was the one that came up with a circuit that you put inside some of the very popular Chinese-made amplifiers, the 50-watt amplifiers. And the reason being is that he was seeing a very high voltage come back into his 817. The ASU 817, and what he wanted to do is he wanted to put something in between that to stop it from happening. So when I guess essentially what the circuit was doing is that when the amplifier was not keyed, that voltage was being pushed to ground inside the amplifier chassis.
Well, as Jonathan puts, basically it's a pull-up circuit in that particular case. In other words, you're tying it high, so to speak, so that the radio itself can go ahead and switch it low. And the low means a ground on transmits. But unless you actually have a physical relay inside the radio, what we call open collector output of a transistor is high if it's going to end up going low when it changes state, and changes state when it goes into the transmit mode. Now, for example, you could actually go ahead and create a circuit where you provided a voltage output when your radio is keyed. But no amplifier requires a voltage. They all require a ground. So that's why we take it from a high to a low, meaning from wherever it starts at a higher voltage, for example, on the keying line to ground. And when we say going to ground, it's not usually exactly 100% to ground on a radio's keying circuit. A lot of times it's less than 20 ohms, less than 10 ohms. It doesn't, you don't have to worry about being exactly at 0 ohms on an open collector transistor that's switched. So, if you get it somewhere, less than 20 ohms, that's usually enough to go ahead and complete a circuit. And most of the time, they're much, much less than that, like 2 ohms, 3 ohms, 5 ohms when it's keyed.
Gotcha. Now, our resident cheater, Mike, N8YO, he's asking a question around some Harris amps. It's on the screen if you want to attempt to answer that one.
Now, let me answer that question. Basically, there is anything that you put in the keying line is going to add time to the keying. So in my particular case, this relay buffer interface that I have right here, the RBI1, switches in less than 5 milliseconds of time. But that does mean that it will add 5 milliseconds of time from the time the radio's circuit is keyed to when the RBI1 will key the amplifier's relay. That's why we set transmit delay, the TXD, to go ahead and be somewhere like 20 milliseconds to go ahead and take care of any relay switching time in the amplifier, plus the 5 milliseconds, very small amount of added time in the relay buffer. Even in solid state buffers, there's going to be switching time. You know, for example, we have, let's see if I can put this guy, whoops, where am I at here? There we are. We have a solid state version too, the RBI1 SS. Now this is about 2 milliseconds of switch time. And the relay, of course, is a solid state one, so it's not quite as robust as the physical mechanical relay in the RBI1A. But it's still good for 120 milliamps of current. The reason that you wouldn't necessarily want to use the RBI1 SS with an older amplifier is because in order to go ahead and switch that big amplifier or that older amplifier's relay, you'd probably want something more robust than just a small solid state relay in there. The whole reason for using a solid state relay buffer would be as if you don't want that tiny little tick. I don't even know if you could hear it. Well, you're also hearing the relay itself, so that's not good. Let me take the relay out. That's actually the relay buffer itself.
Is that your push button making noise, or is that the relay?
No, that's the actual relay buffer itself.
Okay.
So people get pissy about that relay switch sound? And
well,
so you had to...
If they do, but plus don't forget, this is not like a show device in a way. In other words, this is something that's tucked behind your radios for the most part.
Right, right.
Unless you have to have access to it, like by switching the inputs and outputs. For example, here, whoops, where are we at here? Forgive me, guys. Nope, that's not the right way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is the RBI22A. What this is it's got two outputs that are keyed at the same time that either one of these is keyed. So if you wanted to go ahead and have, for example, and then you put it in the center, that actually bypasses the amplifier or whatever's on the outputs. In other words, it does not key the buffer. So if you wanted to run barefoot on your amplifier and your amplifier does not have a bypass switch, just put this in the bypass mode center. If you want radio A, for example, one radio, now that will have the radio 1 does the keying of both of these outputs. You don't have to use them both, but if you wanted to, you could. Like if you have radio 1 key your amplifier, let's just say, or if you want to have radio 2 key your amplifier. And the reason that you might want this is so you don't have to go ahead and plug and unplug cables every time you want to change a radio or to go ahead and do that. So it's like in my particular case, I also use the same system where I can go ahead and have an antenna switch that selects the RF from which radio I want to go ahead and send to the amplifier. And then I switch the buffer to go ahead and switch the keying line to the amplifier. So that's another possibility. And also we have one that's, where am I at here? There it is. Yeah. So this one has got one input, just like the RBI1A, but two outputs. So one radio can key two separate devices. They're completely isolated from each other and isolated from the input.
Yeah, that's the one that Chuck has. And what he does, I'll let him explain in more detail, but he has one amplifier driving a second amplifier because he's one of those types. That's what you're doing, Chuck, right?
And that's a common thing, too. Where I've come from sort of a DXer background, and some of my friends are of the belief that if a tube doesn't have handles, it's not big enough. Mm-hmm. So it's not an uncommon thing to go ahead and have one amplifier driving another. And it's also sometimes if a guy's got a QRP radio, say, for example, an ICOM 705, but he wants to go ahead and also use it as a big power radio, he drives a small amplifier like the MXP50, for example, which is 50 watts out and a pretty good bargain dollar-wise, or the XPA 125B, which is probably the most popular QRP amplifier out there right now. And then use that amplifier to go ahead and drive a larger amplifier, putting out 500 watts or a kilowatt or more. So that's a possibility.
We have some questions queued up too, Ape, and some comments.
Yeah, I don't know if Kevin used. I know that there was a diode in the circuit that I built, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that was just. Where Where did they go?
Well,
There we go.
if it's a pin diode, it would be used for actual RF switching. If it's a conventional silicon diode, what we would do with that, if you were to go ahead and key a relay directly without buffering it through a transistor, for example, or an optocoupler, you'd want to go ahead and put a diode across there, because that would quench or squelch the reverse EMF that happens when you release the coil voltage on a relay. That can actually go ahead and be large enough to damage it. Yeah, that's right. The RBI1, no, the RBI1, oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. The RBI1 and the RBI1A are essentially the same. I probably confused more people by going to the 1A. The whole purpose of the 1A is so I can go ahead and orient the diode on the board correctly and go ahead and have the board fit a little bit better in the box. Otherwise, it's the same thing. Yeah, you set the TX delay in your radio. Is that Don? Yeah, Don, you set the TXD in your radio to go ahead and be 20 milliseconds or 25 milliseconds, and that should cover it for the most part.
Yeah, but I think Don's one of these guys, and I'm guilty as well of using the auto sensing on some of these amplifiers. But setting the delay doesn't protect anything; it just delays the problem inside the amplifier.
Yeah,
that would be switch.
That's right. If you're doing something like that, yeah, that would. I guess I never think of it that way because I just never do it. It's just never a really good way to do it. It's always much better to do what we call hard switch. This has got the I just put in the solid state version in there right now. Now, obviously, the tick you're hearing is the relay here, but they've also got an LED on the solid state one. And the reason we got an LED on the solid state one is because it doesn't make any noise. So if you're ever doing any troubleshooting on your amplifier system, or you're wondering why something's not keying, at least you can see if the actual RBI1 or RBI1SS, the solid state, is actually being keyed, because the solid state relays don't make any noise.
And you're saying that you would want the solid state one if the ticking sound that you hear from the relay switching is giving you grief. Other than that, you're probably better off with the conventional relay one. Not only that, the MTBF, mean time between failures of this relay, is over 1 million cycles. So you're going to be, you'll be long dead, and your children will be still using this RBI1 before it dies. Or your wife's second husband.
It might be. That's exactly right. Yeah, make sure you're also going to get your robe and slippers, so don't worry about that. So there's the solid state one. Oh, that's another good question, Don. Just that you happen to mention it, we actually make bypass switches. So I should have brought one with me here, but it basically comes in a box similar to this, a little bit smaller, as a matter of fact, a box about that size. Got to have mounting tabs on each end, and what you do is you could mount that underneath your shelf of your desk, and then this button here will actually be coming out the side, for example. And when you want to engage your amplifier, you go ahead and do that. Now you're in the operate mode for the amplifier. And then when you key the amplifier will go into the transmit mode, and everything will work fine. When you don't want to operate the amplifier, just release that switch, and now the keying circuit won't be passed through the box to your amplifier's relay. Sometimes, even if you've got a bypass rate switch on your amplifier, sometimes it's farther down where your desk is, and it's just not convenient for you to reach over for it. I've actually got one of these things right underneath my shelf of my second shelf, I guess, of my operating station. And I did something even a little more complicated than that. I have two amplifiers. I have the Lazy Man's amplifier and a Meritron ALS 600 that's good for 500 or 600 watts out. And then I've got a big steamer for a little more power out than that. So what I use is two coaxial relays, and I made a custom box for myself that basically has one of these is the bypass switch that doesn't allow either amplifier to be keyed, and the other switch selects which amplifier does get the keying. In other words, it switches both the input and our output RF. You can do that with a coax switch too if you wanted to, but then you got to switch the input and you got to switch the output of your amplifier if you have two different amplifiers. You could also go ahead and use the RBI1 too as the keying part, because if you keyed two amplifiers at the same time but only sent RF to one, it makes no difference, because you're not going to hurt anything. Take, for example, the ICOM IC 9700. It's only got one keying line for all the bands that are inside an ICOM 9700. So, and believe it or not, we actually make as you might imagine, a breakout box for that. So it allows you to go ahead and use all three of the bands on that to go ahead and have separate outputs. But they're all keyed at the same time because the radio only has one keying line. What we've done is we've just broken it out into three, buffered and isolated, of course. So that's the problem sometimes with some of these radios having only one key line that works on any band. So if you're on 6 meters, for example, and you have a 2 meter amplifier installed and you send the RF to your 6 meter amplifier, well, that's fine, but the 2 meter amplifier will also be keyed. But if you don't send RF to it, it makes no difference. So don't worry about that.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Tio, can you pull up the website so we can kind of go through the different models and see what's available to folks, and then what they should be thinking about if they're going to.
I hate to say it, but I spent most of our time so far is working on the Jonathan KM4 CFT part of the website. So all we've got under the amplifier relay interfaces on the main menu on the left hand side is just showing the RBI1. And I've got it.
Gotcha.
Well, we've also got the other ones from Ham Gadgets without the cases, like the next to the RBI1 on the right hand side. That's a UKA3. That's something that would be more so used if you wanted to go ahead and key the keying circuit of the CW keying in grid block amplifier or grid block transmitters, for example, because that's fast switching at solid state. The ones below it, the UKA2s, those basically are shown as, they're showing it two different ways. One's as a built unit and one is a kit. That's a solid state one that is also available to go ahead and have a high input. So in other words, on the 3.5 millimeter jack that's on the UKA2 and the UKA3, you can either provide a ground to activate it, or you can provide a high. For example, like maybe you've got some sort of a logic level output that you'd like to go ahead and have key the amplifier. It could be a voltage instead of a ground on either the UKA2 or the UKA3 plus. And the MKA, the small little MKA in the corner, is just a very small economy solid state switching device that you kind of have to provide your own cabling and input and output, because it's just got a terminal strip on the lower right stuff. Again, one is a kit and one is built. That's solid state, but still plenty good for what we're doing. As long as you don't mind a little do-it-yourself there, you can put it in your own case and then provide your own inputs and outputs for jacks and things like that.
So when I look at the one that says the RB1A relay buffer 13 pin for ICOM and then the universal, the one for ICOM is the one that uses a 13 pin DIN if you have your keying circuit in a DIN format. Is that the only difference there?
That would be it's only for any of the ICOM. Well, the relay buffer interface is universal. So let's get that out of the way. What's nice about that is that no matter what radio that you use, no matter what amplifier you use, in other words, any radio, which obviously will have to provide a ground on transmit, but that's all of them, to any amplifier that requires a closure of contacts, which is all of them. So now you can keep the amplifier relay buffer interface, and then when you change radios, you just get the cable that you need from your particular radio to the input of the RBI1. And then if you change amplifiers, most larger amplifiers only require a RCA plug to get into the RCA jack. But if you had something like the MXP50 or an XPA 125B or the Juma PA50, PA100D, those amplifiers do require special cables because they don't play nice. They go ahead and have their own way of having the keying jack. But the RBI1 itself is universal. So this particular one is just a combination. We're going to give you the 13-pin DIN connector that plugs into things like the ICOM 706, the ICOM 7000, 7100, 7200, 7300. What it doesn't do is the 7610, for example, which of course uses a different connector. It's an 8-pin DIN. We have those too, but I just don't have them up on the website right now. And then
the 705, so I would imagine a lot of our folks are 705 users with the 50 watt amp. So if you did that though, you would this cable wouldn't work for that. You would need the 3.5 millimeter, right?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Let me just change cameras here to get back to me a second. Yeah. So that's the IC705 has got its own unique cable with a 3.5 millimeter plug on there. It's the tip and ground of the TRS, tip ring shield TRS on a 3 conductor or stereo type plug. tip is the hot or the center conductor, and of course the shield is the ground. And that's the way it works. The tip goes to the center of the RCA plug, and then shield to shield from the 3.5 millimeter to the RCA plug. And then the XPA, of course, it's hard to explain exactly what pins they are, but they're shown in the manual as well. The only thing is that with a 6-pin mini DIN, you got to have a very steady hand, and you have the way those screwed on kind of tight to go ahead and really solder those things, because it's a very small plug.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
All right. I didn't know if we had any other questions or if we wanted to proceed to the raffle part of the program.
I think they've questioned Dan. They've interrogated Dan. I've seen a lot of questions tonight.
So mine is a relay buffer still, right?
That's right.
Just,
the RBI
so I could
one
use
too.
this on any radio I have.
That's right.
From what
Any
you're saying.
radio,
Okay.
because you just get the cable that you need for the radio. And some radios are as simple as an RCA jack on the back.
Yeah.
Some Yaesu radios and some ICOM radios use either a
The Hermes Light.
Yeah, the Hermes. That's right. Hermes Light 2 is exactly right. That just has an RCA jack on the output of that. So it's a simple RCA to the input.
Okay.
You probably have one of them in your wire bucket sitting around your ham shack, right? Everybody's got those.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I got all those hanging right here now.
See, there you go.
Ape has chokes and you have wires.
Yeah.
Jody, our Canadian friend, and I've met him. He is actually very polite, mostly.
In person.
In person. In the chat, he's a little bit saucy, a little bit curdled on his poutine. So he says he doesn't see any ESD protection diodes on the MKA MOSFETs. Has anyone that you know of ever killed a transistor in a no smoke manner?
Let's put it this way: if they have, I haven't been told about it. So I don't. In other words, I've never had any feedback telling me that, oh my God, this thing fried or on me or anything like that. It is it's something that we don't sell as much of because it's not completely plug and play. You actually have to do something with it yourself. But you could even build it as a kit. It'll take you, if it takes you more than 5 minutes, then you don't know what end of the soldering iron is hot. So it's really it's an easy to build kit. Actually, all of my kits are easy to build. Whether you can even get the RBI 1A in a kit form. You could buy that as a kit.
Yeah, I saw pretty much everything on your site. You have built, and then you have in kit form as well.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Even and I hope you guys will invite me back for another show about repeater controllers, because we actually make a really nice universal repeater controller. We've sold over 10,000 of those things. You got to be kidding me. I mean, I sell them in GMRS. I sell them for portable use, for ham radio stuff. Even commercial guys buy this because it's $90 as a built unit, or $70 is a kit. So. Anyway, maybe another show if you guys deem so.
If in a completely unrelated subject, Dan, talk about your Ultra Pico Keyer.
Oh, the Ultra Pico Keyer, it's really wonderful. It runs on a 2032 coin cell battery, so there's not much audio power output to drive the tiny little speaker that's inside of it. That would probably be the only thing I think that there's if you want to call it a shortcoming. But it's intended to go ahead and be a portable, small keyer. It's got 8 memories, 4 on the front buttons at a time. You can also go into the menu and select the second bank of memories. It's inexpensive. It's got Ultimatic for a keyer mode. You can do it bug mode, straight key mode, iambic A, iambic B. Speed control is actually grab the knob on the front, or the shaft of the pot on the front, and twist it. That's how you go ahead and change the speed. Very nice that way. What I normally do is I just use the side tone on my radio, but it does have 3 jacks on the back. So one of them is the keying output, and it's a 2N7000. So that is up to 60 volts and 200 milliamps of current to go. There you go. 60 volts and 200 milliamps of current to switch a radio's CW circuit, which is more than enough for everybody's radio. Another one is the paddle input, which is going to be 3 conductors. Your DIT, DA, and then the ground for that. And then the other jack is either headphones, well, in this case, earbuds, or you could go ahead and also plug in a powered external speaker, which is another way to do it, and then use your own code practice oscillator. Now, for me personally, I never use the straight key mode in any keyer. Why? because it takes time to go into a menu and change it into the straight key mode. What do? I put a straight key on the terminals of the output of the keyer as it goes into the radio's key jack. So that means I can go ahead and use a paddle with the keyer, or I can instantly just touch the straight key and bam, I'm keying the radio.
And you're keying the radio without changing everything out.
Exactly.
That's a good trick. I hadn't thought about that, but that's swank.
Yeah, because even though my keyer's got that feature, I never use it because I just put the key on the output.
So Jonathan's saying this is a good option for folks who use the G90 because it has memory playback. The G90 does have you can record a message in CW and play that back, but what I don't think you can do is adjust the speed, right? Is that what you're saying, John?
I know that the SW3B is hard to adjust a speed on, and some of these things that have only got one memory, or if it's hard to get to the memories for playback, that is another radio that you'd like to use this type of keyer on. In fact, I never use the radio's internal keyer for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to have any of the real estate of my screen, for example. Like if you take the ICOM 7300, I don't want to have those buttons taking up a space on my screen. So I just use an external keyer on that. Plus, you have to go into a menu to go ahead and get to these memories usually, or you have to plug in some sort of an external keyer device, which basically it turns the radio into an ohm meter. It measures the actual resistance that you've selected with switches. It's all with fixed resistors that these switches, when you touch the switch, it presents a certain resistance at that particular jack on the radio. The radio senses that resistance, believe it or not, and then sends the corresponding keyer output memory.
All right, and Jonathan, don't take me to ham court. I might be mistaken. He's saying that he says he doesn't know if you can play back CW messages on the G90. I thought you could, but I could be wrong about that. So just everybody simmer down, put down the pitchforks, stop boiling the oil.
Boil the pitchforks. Boil the pitchforks.
All right, now it's raffle time.
Woo-hoo!
That's right. Again, thank you for the generous offer.
Of course.
So, in case you missed it, Dan, tell the people what we're doing here, and thank you, Dan, for providing it.
Yeah, what are we giving away?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and offer the RBI1. There it is, RBI1A. My right side, yeah. RBI1A power cable, and I will be happy to go ahead and include your radio cable and your amplifier cable with this. So it could be up to about $110 value depending upon what cables you ask me to include with it. So the basic interface itself is $70, and then each cable is somewhere in the neighborhood of around $20 a piece. So you tell me when it's time to ship to you, whoever wins this, what radio you have and what amplifier you have, and I'll provide the right cables for it.
Yeah, so whoever wins, let us know at Coffee and Ham Radios, and then we'll pass all your information over to Dan. So that way we don't have any nefarious behavior or trickery. Some of the folks that watch our show are a little shady, so we got to be careful running through the filter.
Like Mike and Liberty Cave.
Yeah.
Right, being the two primary ones.
That's two of them.
And then if anybody doesn't win and they still want one of these, they can go to hamgadgets.com and
No, not Ham Radio Gadgets. It's Ham Gadgets.
Oh, Ham Gadgets.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Oh, who did that?
Yep, you know who did
it's
that?
a ham radio gadget. I mean,
Jeez.
It works.
Well, hold on a second. T.O.'s going to fix it, so everybody just, take a sip of your water.
Fix that, please.
I'm fixing it right now.
That's what we call delegation.
It's hamgadgets.com. Hamgadgets.com.
Well, we're not putting up a web URL, Dan. It was a keyword.
Yeah, but still, we should have consistent branding. Okay. Jim's new, so we're apologizing.
Dramatic, because it's how he rolls.
Because what's her name wasn't available, so.
You're right, John. Right, we tried to get a Telemundo girl on the show, but then we ended up with Jim. So, I mean, it's just the way it worked out.
It is what it is, boys.
So, do people know how to go ahead and enter the raffle? Is there something you got to click to go ahead and be part of it, or what?
All you got to do is type Ham Gadgets, case sensitive, and an exclamation point in the chat, and then you'll automatically be entered.
I see. So we're going to give people a little time to do that, I guess, or
we are,
or only if they're fast enough.
Yeah, they're doing it. There's a delay between us and the viewers.
And some of you typing challenged people need to go back and look at what you typed. Andy
so
Cowley, you know better. I know you know better, Andy
We
Cowley.
have 30 entries so far.
Ham gadgets, exclamation point. Case counts. And some of you are just being funny.
Oh, hang on, guys. I just got a text message from Jonathan, KM4CFT, and he wants me to go ahead and he's going to donate an NFED half-wave kit to this as well.
Nice.
So I'm not sure if you probably want to go ahead.
We'll do that as a separate.
Okay,
We'll do it as soon as this one's done.
Okay, all right, and that's thanks to
Jonathan.
Jonathan, KM4CFT.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonathan. You're all right.
Jonathan's awesome.
$56. How many people are watching? 137 of you people. Now, if you don't have an amplifier, the SBA is not really going to help you a whole lot, but
That doesn't stop them. If it's free, they want it. That's what I've come to learn.
right.
It's a trophy. I'll mount it on their
I don't
mantle.
even know what this does, but I want one.
Well, one nice thing about this is that it's not going to be replaced quickly by any kind of technology. It doesn't have a shelf life, so if you use it today, tomorrow, whatever, it's going to be just as valid.
Take a big old drag, Ape.
Yeah, I know. So I gotta do something about that.
Ron Walensky.
Well, you keep telling me you can quit at any time.
No, I said I'm
sending
not
you
a
an
quitter. Is what I said.
Now, Abe said something about giving away some of his Chinese amps later on the show, so I don't know.
Wow.
I don't recall
I'll
saying
take that
that.
50 amp. God.
The one I have accidentally cooked when I was poking around the inside.
Well, you
of it
should
a
send
little
that one to TO because I think he can fix them. He cooks
Yeah.
them too.
bit. Yeah, I'm not
I
exactly
know how
sure,
to fix
but
amps.
it also has the problem with the. It's the same one that Uncle Jesse was getting upset at us at the Hamvention or at Huntsville for talking about the spurious emissions from it.
Oh yeah.
The MXP
All right.
50M. Yeah.
I think
Only every
we're gonna
third
do
one
it.
has spurs.
We're at 58. And that number has
Do it.
pretty much stopped. Boom.
Come on, ape.
Here we go. You put
Oh
your
yeah,
name
he
in?
wasn't kidding. He put his name in there.
Hey man, I could always.
Oh,
That's
yeah. I
right.
want
Didn't
one.
Oh, look at
Pam
Pepe and
Paul.
Paul.
Oh wow. Is he in?
You have
is
to
he
wait
in
for you to get
Tokyo
back
still?
from Japan. Yeah.
All right, now
Yeah.
he's the one that won the RBI 1A. That was the first one, right?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. All right. Then
So-
this next one is going to be for that NFED half wave.
Yep. So Paul, just email me since you already got my email address. Just email me the radio that you have, and the amplifier, and then your shipping address, and I'll get it over to Dan.
Okay. So what happens if Ape wins one of these things? I saw I put his name in there. What? is that-
We redraw. So
Oh, okay. I see.
He draws it out.
That's like my dad used to say, "Good to have a friend in the factory."
right.
Got it one piece at a time.
Yeah.
And this is for an NFED half wave dipole antenna.
Actually, NFED,
Yeah.
not a dipole, but it's NFED half-wave wire antenna. And if you put about 65 feet of wire on it, you'll get 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters with good SWR and no adjustments.
Now I would
So we
imagine
had
people are going to
Jonathan
go crazy.
and yeah, we had Jonathan and Dan on the show a couple of weeks ago. Jonathan makes a new CW radio that's pretty slick. CW
Oh my
radio
God,
from a
but-
person that actually does CW.
Yeah, the CFT one. Let me grab one real quick.
I mean, when he said real quick, he meant it. You see how fast that guy moves?
Yeah, he's fast.
Faster than you and me, Abe.
Well, and Chuck.
I was leaving Chuck
No,
out. I
about
wasn't going
me.
to pick on the elderly.
Oh shit! I seen you try to walk and run.
Son, you
Well, actually, never run. Never run. I guess.
He runs in reverse. He's so fast.
I'll run to the pork chop sandwich truck.
Yeah,
I will
that's true.
knock a mofo down to get pork
He
chop
waddled
sandwich.
right over there. I need a keying for my 705 and for my KX2.
You just need the cable.
I just need a cable. Yeah,
That's
Just
right.
2 cables.
We don't run.
That's,
Might be the
that's,
same cable.
that's the CFT one that Jonathan makes that we were talking about.
Let me get you on full screen so you can sizzle
okay.
it.
Sizzle it.
That's the
Sizzle.
CFT one that Jonathan makes. 40, 30, 20, 17, and 15 meters, 5 watts out. And it's a fantastic little radio. One little thing I got to brag about. We just finished the Colorado QSO party, and I scored 80,000 points in the Colorado QSO party, and that bested the high score from before of 11,600 points. So
wow.
all with this radio.
Everybody that I
You
know
didn't
who
get
has
me,
one
though.
of those loves it. They are getting tons of press on the YouTubes.
Even some people who actually know how to use it, as opposed to some other people on the YouTubes that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All right, we are at 61. Come on, people. We ain't got all night. The show ends in 4 minutes. See, I hear crickets.
I would hit the
Chop.
button.
I'm going to hit the button.
That's at Dan's house.
Boom. Let's see who we got. Now, Jonathan, this is a QRP antenna or QRO?
It's 5 watts, QRP.
5 watts,
Cooley.
QRP.
Cooley.
Cooley, my
Cooley
man.
Cooley looks like the kind of guy that ain't got time for QRP.
Cooley, turn down the volume on the radio. Take it off 11 and go down to like 2.
Yeah, so Cooley, if you want to email us at coffeeandhamradios@gmail.com, your contact, your shipping information, we'll go ahead and get that out to you. Or you can just tell us in the chat right now that you are good on QRZ, and then we'll use that address.
Jonathan clarified it is 5 watts on CWFT8 and 10 watts on sideband.
Well, there you go.
but-
The sideband too?
and Jonathan's very conservative.
The antenna.
So believe me, when he says 5 watts, you could easily put in an ICOM 705 into that with no problem on CW. I'm not sure about digital because that's more of a continuous mode. But Jonathan, whatever Jonathan builds is conservative and built like a rock.
Oh,
I didn't know
sure
it
is.
did sideband also.
Yeah,
It's the antenna, Chuck, not the radio.
yeah,
Oh, the antenna. Okay, sorry.
yeah. And obviously, sideband is an intermittent mode, so that would be even easier on it.
Jody.
than a
Gotcha,
digital mode.
gotcha. I was thinking the little radio. I'm like, what?
Chuck, you need to take your ginkgo biloba, son. You know what I'm
telling
saying?
That's true. It's true.
Get that Geritol out after the stream, Chuck, and pound
I've been
it.
working
son.
hard
Cover
today,
all of
man.
ours? Did we cover
All
all
right,
of
so
our
Abe, you'll
chats
you'll
today?
send me both of these guys at contact information and stuff, or at least okay, because I didn't
Yep.
make note of the second one.
Yep,
David,
we'll take care of it.
KD9WTA got the membership from
Awesome,
Jody.
Dave. Welcome to the
So-
club.
Jody, thank you, and David,
Kathy forgot
welcome
last
to the
night.
champagne room.
Yep, and we'll have to get a hold of Cooley because he is not letting us know that he's good on QRZ. Unless he did and I missed it, but I've been paying attention somewhat, so I don't think he
I
did.
didn't see it. I didn't see it.
Cooley,
back
are you
at
good
you,
on the
Paul.
Z, bro?
He says he has a 705.
Yeah,
That
that's
part he
all I
said.
saw. He's probably running around the house right now. Woo!
He's telling his old lady, hey, I won.
I won.
I've
Does the
seen a lot worse. I
705
wasn't doing it that fast.
the 705 and the KX2 use the same cables off of your box?
No,
Or different cables.
705 uses if I'm not mistaken, the
3.5.
705 is the tip on a 3.5, and a KX2 I think uses the ring on the 3.5.
okay.
Believe it or not, the KX3 they use a 2.5 millimeter plug. I don't know why they
Oh,
went
wow.
with a smaller diameter. That could be a little on the delicate side, but we make those two.
They did that so
You
they could
can.
sell more cables.
So they could sell
Do you-
cables. That's exactly right.
Do you think you could make a combo 705 KX2 cable since one's tip and one's ring, or is it tip grounded to ring and? Or
No,
how does that-
no, because there is the tip and ring that are not used on one radio for keying are used for something
Yes.
else. Yeah.
right.
So one of the radios or the other wouldn't be happy.
Well, awesome, Bob.
Bob,
right,
I'm
well,
sorry.
Bob, you're sad. That's a sad life if this is the highlight
right.
right now. I'm just telling you.
Right, Jim gets it.
Well, we still got a couple of days left in the week. So with that, I'm going to say thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for participating in the chat. Thanks for
thank
all
y'all.
the memberships and super chats. Much appreciated. And especially thank you to Jonathan and Dan for the giveaways tonight. It was unexpected. I'm hitting the button. That means the stream's going to end in about 4